The question is no longer just, do we have enough data? The question becomes, can we safely use this data at scale? Companies want to move faster with AI, analytics, and automation, but they also need to protect customer data, employee data, business sensitive data. How do you protect sensitive data while still allowing the business to use it? Databolt helps protect sensitive data at the data layer. The broader goal of Databolt is to help companies move faster with data, but in a controlled and well-managed way. AI is not creating a data problem, it's exposing the data problems many organizations already had.
Hey everyone, and thanks for listening to another episode of the Future of Data Security. Today I'm speaking with Bian. He's the VP and Head of Product for Databolt at Capital One. Leon, thank you so much for joining the podcast today.
Thank you, John, for having me on your podcast.
Fantastic. We were chatting earlier, and you've built a lot of enterprise security products. I saw your time at Intuit, more than 100 million customer scale type of organization. And now you're leading the Databolt product at Capital One Software. You're also involved in venture. You're also involved with the MIT Sloan Alum Network. And among other things, you've had quite an exciting career. I'd love to hear from you. What keeps you excited today, and what would you say are your core areas of expertise?
Yeah, what's keeping me excited today is obviously AI is moving so fast. As you mentioned, I've spent quite a few years in data security, right? But data security has also evolved into this AI world. So I'm quite excited about where the data security field is moving because AI raises the stakes as AI runs on data. For many enterprises, their proprietary data is becoming their AI advantage because the models themselves are becoming more accessible. So the real differentiate comes from the quality, depth, and specificity of the data that you can safely use. So I'm seeing a new challenge that companies want to move faster with AI, analytics, and automation, but they also need to protect customer data, employee data, business sensitive data, and other sensitive information. So the question is no longer just, do we have enough data? The question becomes, can we safely use this data at scale? So the way having been in the data security space for almost a decade, one way I think about this transformation because of AI is not creating a data problem. It's exposing the data problems many organizations already had. For example, fragmented data, unclear ownership, weak classification, broad access, and inconsistent controls, and so on. So I'm really excited about helping enterprises, not just Capital One, but other enterprises, solve the problem of securing their data in the age of AI.
And for those that are not familiar with Databolt and the work you've been doing, can you explain the product and the problem it solves and some of the core technological solutions you're developing?
So let me start with what is Capital One Software. Capital One Software is the enterprise B2B software business of Capital One. We take technologies that we developed internally and battle tested at the bank scale and make them available to other enterprises. So Databolt is a solution that we developed in-house and now we are making the solution available to other enterprises. It's focused on a very practical enterprise problem. How do you protect sensitive data while still allowing the businesses to use it? Many companies want to modernize analytics, accelerate AI, and share data safely across their own environments and with partners. But sensitive data often becomes a blocker. Teams either slow down because they are worried about exposure, or they create one-off controls that are difficult to scale. Databolt helps protect sensitive data at the data layer using tokenization and related data protection technologies. The idea is to reduce exposure of sensitive data while at the same time preserving usability for business workflows, analytics, and AI. The broader goal of Databolt is to help companies move faster with data, but in a controlled and well-managed way.
And can you elaborate a little bit more on that tokenization approach as the core defense? It seems like you want security to travel with the data itself. How does it work? What are some of the advantages of that solution?
Yes. So tokenization, I would say people often compare tokenization with encryption. The way I would frame tokenization is tokenization protects your data at transit and at rest, but it also preserves the utility of your data. So the tokens could be moving across your different systems. It could be used by this agent, the other agent. But as you mentioned, we are carrying security, across these different environments. Versus, for example, some of the other technologies like the traditional encryption. And once you encrypt the data, and you can't really use the data because it just changes the format. It doesn't preserve the referential integrity, but tokenization does all of that. So that's the foundation that we are seeing how you effectively protect the data layer. And we consider tokenization as one of the most effective ways to protect your most sensitive data.
And with the Databolt, is that focus on unstructured data, structured data, all of the above? And how would you tokenize it? Would it be centrally? Would it be distributed?
Yeah, so I would say all of the above, right? Databolt, when it was launched in April of 2025, a year ago, we primarily focused on structured data. But then very soon we realized that at any enterprise, between 80 to 90% of their data is actually unstructured. So we have expanded the data vault to also support unstructured data. So that means, then we cover the 80 to 90% of the data that previously we did not cover. And then whether it's centralized, decentralized, our view is you need a centralized plane, a control plane, to see what's going on with data security. What's your data security posture in your environment? So we have that. So we have a control plane, and then we deploy data planes into your environment so that you can run your tokenization in a distributed way. But ultimately, there's a centralized control that you can have a single pane to see what's your data security posture.
It's really interesting that you mentioned the control layer because this is something I hear about and I think about a lot nowadays with the shift to agentic AI. And I think broadly the challenge is switching to not just merely who has access to data, but what happens when an authorized agent takes an action against the data. Are you also thinking about this, and how do you see this tokenization architecture addressing these emerging, fast-moving agentic AI challenges?
The way I see it is the fundamentals have not changed. We actually need to put more emphasis on protecting the data layer, right? And over the past 2 to 3 years, ever since the introduction of Gen AI, ChatGPT, many enterprises have focused on the higher layer, which is the model safety or Gen AI guardrails, all of those things. What we view is we actually have to double down on the data layer. And to properly protect the data layer with data classification, data discovery, tokenization, fine-grained access control, and dynamic governance, right? So you have to have that framework in place. And then when you look at the agentic AI layer, there are still a lot of things that enterprises need to do to safeguard this new world for data security. So, for example, you will need to implement data governance at runtime. This is a hot topic these days. I keep hearing from various sources. And I believe that the industry collectively is working towards that goal. Have we solved that problem? I don't think so at this point, but over the next couple of years, we will solve that problem. So essentially, we need that foundational data layer to be secured with traditional security methods. And then on top of that, we need to add additional controls for the agentic world to make sure that we are transforming from a static data governance world into a dynamic data governance world based on intent and purpose of the agents.
That's very interesting. I think, like you said, it's an old problem where probably people had a lot of access previously, where they weren't spending all day perusing around to see what do I have access to. But now, at the click of a button, at the drop of a hat, you could say, "Okay, I want you to scan these 100, OneDrive and find anything I want." So it's causing a lot of friction with enterprise-wide adoption. When you said we will solve this problem, I'm curious what your perspective is on the we, because I see a lot of confusion in large banks, large enterprises, because typically there's the CIO, there's the CISO, there's data governance and privacy groups, there's a new AI lab. Everybody's trying to get a tool or a platform to do something with the data, right? To put in place that data layer, and every vendor is trying to do that. And I feel it's causing a lot of confusion. Have you been seeing that? And who owns that problem space really inside an enterprise?
Great question. My view is this it will be a collective effort between various organizations within an enterprise. The CISO, the CIO, the CTO, the CDO, the CAIO, and the chief privacy officer. So all of these organizations will need to work collectively to tackle this challenge. And what I'm seeing is, I believe in the next couple of months and couple of years, we will see a lot of experimentations. There will be silos for sure, right? But if you're an enterprise that's serious about tackling the data security in the age of AI, you will need to have a mandate from the very top. And then you have to have a strategy. You have to bring all of these different organizations together and let's sit down. And the first thing we need to do is revisit that data governance layer. Are we having the right data governance policies and standards? And then from there, we figure out what should be the architecture for data security and AI in today's world. And then from there, then we can figure out what the solutions, right? And today you're seeing so many different vendors, so many startups tackling this space. And my view is there will be consolidations going on in the vendor space, but at the enterprise level, there will also be a different type of consolidation, which is, hey, we have to be aligned. Different organizations have to be aligned to tackle this problem together.
As it relates to that shift to Gen AI, right? Every provider, it's almost like a switch was flicked one day. They started adding LLMs to their solution, and often they don't even ask the customer. It just happens. And so it's been very interesting, very chaotic to see the data security products evolve. I'm curious what you've seen on that front, and where have you seen data security products overpromise and maybe underdeliver, and where have you seen them really shine in this new transformation?
Well, there are multiple myths in the data security world, right? And I will cite a few. So one myth is that I have strong IAM, right? I have a strong identity tool. That means the data is secure. But obviously, the identity is foundational, but authentication only tells you who is asking. It does not always tell you whether that person, the system, or the AI agent should access this specific data for this specific purpose. And then a second myth, I would call it, or in the industry, is RBAC or ABAC alone will solve the problem because role-based and attributes access controls are important, but agentic AI introduces a new dimension the same agent with the same access may be safe in one context, but it becomes a risk in another. So RBAC tells us who ABAC adds what and when, but in the agentic era, we also need to understand why, which is the intent we discussed earlier. And then there's a third myth, which is on behalf of user access automatically solves over access. It helps, but many users have accumulated access over many years. So if you give agent access just to inherit the user's access, and then you can end up with permission creep operating at the machine speed. So those are some of the, what I'm seeing. And when I talk to other enterprises, they are saying, oh, we already have this, we already have that, our problem is solved, right? Some of the better practices include, or I'm seeing some of the startups in this space, they actually have done a lot of research. So it's not just I'm using Claude to write some code and to create a guardrail for this. You have to look at this holistically, right? So one a research that some people started is a runtime governance. Like how do you govern runtime? So what I'm seeing is there will be collaborations between the industry and academia to tackle these problems, and many people are looking into it. But again, there are a lot of myths uh, in the industry that people think, hey, I've just and I have that, and we're secure, and that's not the case.
I resonate with what you said. I was literally outside my office this morning with a customer, and they were saying exactly that. They thought the answers would come from IAM, RBAC, and I was sharing with them, what if an agent in a runtime scenario wants to consume data, but it's to share it with an external model or an internal model? These policies needs to be dynamically adjusted. But you're totally right. There's a big myth out there where this is an IAM issue. I think it goes beyond that in terms of what agents can do and having more fine-grained policies there. So that's very insightful. We heard about Mythos, then it became Fable, then it got banned for non-US participants. Very interesting developments lately. I'm curious what trends you are seeing that you think most security leaders, most executives are underestimating right now with everything that's happening.
What frontier AI models like Mythos and OpenAI's Daybreak have introduced is a new security risk, which is the speed, right? And these frontier AI models collapses the time from discovery of a vulnerability to exploitation of the vulnerability, and that time is collapsing to zero, right? The question is, how do enterprises handle that? So one of the ways that Anthropic or AI have done is to restrict access to those models. But I don't think it's long term, it's sustainable, and banning, and it's before long before other countries, nation states could also have such models, right? So what we need to do is actually, I wrote a blog recently on this very topic. What we are proposing is, despite those models, we need to look at foundational layer. Over the past decades, cybersecurity was built on human speed, right? And it takes years for some exploitation to happen after a vulnerability has discovered. But now the speed is really, really fast. So what we need to do is to relook at the foundational layer, especially the data layer. We need to secure with the methods that we talked about before, and making sure that even if an agent breaches your perimeter, the data is still intact. The data layer is still intact. So this is what I believe, at the one level, what an industry leader should do. And then at the second level, we also need to figure out how we can, more quickly fix and patch those vulnerabilities. Now, just to be honest, Mythos or Open or Daybreak, they are not identifying new vulnerabilities. These vulnerabilities already existed in software, right? They're just finding those vulnerabilities faster. So what that means is there's no way for a human to go back and look at to fix all of the vulnerabilities. So that means we will need to leverage AI as a tool to look at those vulnerabilities and use AI to close those vulnerabilities. And then one more thing I want to mention is with more companies adopting vibe coding, writing code using AI, the AI will become smarter. They will write more secure code. So if there's some consolation in the future, right, the code will have fewer vulnerabilities. And the AI tools can even rewrite existing code so that they will fix those vulnerabilities. So those are some of the things that I will look at. There's a huge risk, no doubt, with those frontier AI models, but um, we have a solution, and we should use that to our advantage.
Yeah, I like what you said. And to recap it, you're saying, AI is exposing age-old vulnerabilities, just more obviously and faster. And secondly, we need to use AI to secure AI. That's the only way, given that new speed and the risks that are involved. I was recently reading about Edge AI. A model like Mythos is reported to be in the trillions of parameters, and it'll perform, let's take an example, on a typical logic benchmark, maybe at 93, 95%. Then we have small language models below 10 billion parameters that have really improved recently in terms of their performance. And on the same benchmark, they may rank, 86%. So you're going from 10 billion parameter to 3 trillion, and really the delta is, sort of 5 to 7% performance. We also have, manufacturers like Dell and others that have announced neural processing units and a line of AI first PCs. Every week there's a new announcement on Edge AI. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on this, and how will it affect the risk profile for large enterprises, maybe doing more at the edge than was previously possible?
Yeah, it's certainly a challenge. It's a new risks that we are facing. So, for example, in the old world, right? So everybody, if someone downloads a data set onto his or her laptop and then runs models, how do we protect that data? How do we make sure that that data is secure at the edge? So people developed tools like DLP, right, to protect that. So we will need the next generation of DLP solutions at the edge, and but this is not something that the industry should overlook. We have to take this seriously, and because it's nascent, right, with edge AI, and we have a good opportunity to develop tools to safeguard those AI models and those deployment models for edge AI.
If you were to give a piece of advice to maybe a younger Leon or somebody starting in the product management, the data security space, what would be sort of your top pieces of advice, or maybe some hard lessons you've learned along the way?
First of all, you always want to take a customer first approach. As a product manager, don't dwell on a technology. We have a lot of technologies that we can leverage, but you should always start from a customer problem. What problem are you trying to solve? And then uh, work backwards from that problem, and to make sure that you actually solve a meaningful problem that the customer will appreciate. So that's my biggest advice, and it was also a mistake that I made in my early career, because I was always fascinated by technologies, right? And you have to start with a custom problem. And the second advice in today's world is you want to embrace AI, and there's no way around it, right? So a lot of practices in product management has changed. So, for example, instead of writing a 20-page PRD, you can use AI to create a prototype instead of using creating that PRD. So there are a lot of things that will evolve in the practice of product management in the age of AI. So we need to adapt. And if there's a younger version of Leon, and I would fully embrace AI. But again, the fundamentals haven't changed. You still need to help customers solve their pain points.
It's always painful to watch technology looking for a problem.
Yes, you can say that again.
All right, Leon, that's all the time we have for today. Before we wrap up, if people want to follow up, maybe look at some of your articles, what's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, please go to LinkedIn, and you can find me there, Leon Bian, on LinkedIn. And I spend quite a bit of time on LinkedIn these days.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you again, Leon. Really interesting, really sharp conversation. I want to thank you for being on.
Yeah, thank you, John, again, for having me here.